Every tablespoon of America's favorite ketchup carries a full teaspoon of sugar, which means the average child's plate of fries can wear more sugar than a cookie, served by the squeeze, counted by no one, on the one food category every parent trusts without reading. The word fancy on a ketchup label is not marketing, it's an official government grade, with an actual federal flow test behind it, a metal ramp, a stopwatch, and a legal speed limit, and almost nobody alive knows what it means. In 1981, the United States government briefly tried to let ketchup count as a school lunch vegetable, and the backlash became one of the most famous food policy scandals in American history. A scandal this file will explain properly, because everyone knows the punchline and almost nobody knows the story. And here's the twist. This channel almost never gets to deliver. A century ago, the biggest name in ketchup was the hero of American food safety, the company that fought its own industry to pass the laws this channel quotes every week, which makes what the bottle became today one of the saddest before and after stories in the entire supermarket. 120 years told in one ingredient list. Ketchup is in 90+% of American households, the most universal bottle in the country. Opened daily, read never. Trusted by 3-year-olds and grandmothers alike. And tonight, the fridge door's oldest resident finally gets its file. We're going through 8 ketchup brands and products you should not buy, and 3 that are actually tomato. Number 8. Number 8. The teaspoon in every tablespoon. Start with the math, because ketchup's entire reputation depends on you never doing it, and it takes 15 seconds. The standard serving is 1 tablespoon, and mainstream ketchup carries about 4 grams of sugar in that tablespoon, which is 1 full teaspoon, meaning ketchup is roughly a quarter sugar by weight, spoon for spoon, in the neighborhood of chocolate syrup. The comparison that shocked you in the barbecue file, and sweeter than plenty of things you'd never serve a child at dinner, vanilla ice cream runs about the same sugar percentage. The difference is, nobody serves ice cream on fries and calls it lunch. Now run the 2 multipliers this series has taught you. First, the serving fiction. Nobody in the history of French fries has used 1 tablespoon. A real plate runs 3, 4, 5 tablespoons. A squeeze bottle doesn't even dispense that little by accident. So an honest serving of fries delivers 12 to 20 grams of sugar, a cookie's worth, sometimes a soda can's half, on the salty course, before the actual soda arrives, sugar bracketing the meal from both sides while officially appearing in neither. Second, the frequency. Ketchup is the single most default condiment in American childhood. On fries, nuggets, burgers, hot dogs, eggs, mac and cheese, some kids sauce their pizza with it. It's the flavor many children demand on everything, the great red gateway through which picky eaters agree to eat it all, meaning it's not an occasional dose. It's a daily delivery system with a cartoon-adjacent trust level no other sugar source enjoys, and a child running ketchup at 2 meals a day is drinking a quiet extra soda's worth of sugar across the week from the red bottle alone. And the pediatric sugar guidance most families never hit already, under 25 grams a day for kids, can lose 1/5 of its budget to the condiment nobody counts. The industry knows exactly what it built. Sweet plus salt plus umami plus vinegar tang is the bliss point formula from our barbecue file, and food scientists have written openly about ketchup as one of the most perfectly engineered flavor products ever made. It hits every fundamental taste at once, which is precisely why children fixate on it. A developing palate meets a product tuned to overwhelm it, and an entire generation learns that vegetables taste like candy, or they don't get eaten. A training program running 3 squeezes a day through the exact year's taste preferences set for life. And the adult palate that needs everything a little sweet, graduated from this program without ever knowing it enrolled. We'll say the fair sentence. Ketchup is not poison. A burger with ketchup is a fine day in a fine life. But you deserve to see the arithmetic the bottle hides behind a 1 tablespoon fiction, because once you've seen the teaspoon, you'll never unsee the squeeze. Run the demonstration at home tonight. It's the best one in this file. Measure 4 level tablespoons of ketchup into a bowl, the honest amount on a plate of fries. Then spoon 4 teaspoons of white sugar into a glass beside it, and show the table. That's the pour. That's what's in the pour. No lecture required. The glass does the talking. And the sweetener doing the work has already met you in another file. Number 7. The corn syrup shell game. Fridge door edition. Because the barbecue file's biggest trick turns out to have learned everything from its parent. Flip the classic bottle, the #1 brand in America, and read the order. Tomato concentrate, distilled vinegar, high fructose corn syrup. Corn syrup, that's 2 corn syrups back to back, listed separately. The sweetener splitting trick from our barbecue sauce file. Working the same shift 1 shelf over. Split the sugar across 2 names, so neither has to rank higher than the vinegar. And the industry's response to 2 decades of corn syrup backlash sits right beside it on the shelf. The same brand's Simply version, real sugar, no high fructose corn syrup, sold at a premium as the wholesome twin. And the sugar grams, check 'em, essentially identical, 4 grams a tablespoon either way. Because cane sugar and corn syrup are nutritionally interchangeable, the same half fructose chemistry, a fact we covered fully in the barbecue file, and mainstream nutrition science has repeated for years, to an audience that wanted a villain molecule instead of a villain amount. Organic versions, same grams, the farming changed, the teaspoon didn't. Upscale versions, often the same grams wearing a heavier glass bottle. Even the ketchups marketed at children, the ones with cartoon labels and easy grip bottles, run the identical formula. The audience got smaller, the teaspoon didn't. The reform was a rebrand. The teaspoon stayed in the tablespoon, and the premium you pay for the word simply is the price of a nicer name for the same molecule. The exact shell game from the barbecue aisle, now running in the fridge door. Because the 2 products are siblings. Ketchup is barbecue sauce's parent. Literally, the American barbecue bottle began as spiced, sweetened ketchup. The sugar strategy is the family business, and the fridge door is the family home. The honest signal, as always, is never which sweetener, it's how much and where it ranks. And in this category, there's a special twist worth knowing. Ketchup with sweetener in the top 3 isn't an outlier. It's the standard of the entire mainstream shelf, which is why the picks at the end of this video had to leave the mainstream entirely to find bottles where tomato does the talking. And speaking of standards, the next segment is about the actual law of ketchup and the strangest word on the label. Number 6, the word fancy, and the secret laws of ketchup. Here's a label decode almost nobody on earth knows, and after the heavy files this series has run lately, enjoy a fun one. Ketchup is one of the foods with a federal standard of identity, an actual legal recipe definition, like the ice cream and vanilla standards from our earlier files. The law says what may be called ketchup, catsup, or ketchup. All 3 spellings are in the regulation. Tomato concentrate, vinegar, sweetener, seasonings, and it grades the result. And the top USDA grade for ketchup is literally called fancy. That word on a bottle or a food service packet, fancy ketchup, is not puffery, it's a grade term. Historically tied to specifications including how much tomato solid is in the bottle and how thick it runs. And the thickness test is the best part. The government measures ketchup with an instrument called a Bostwick consistometer, a little metal ramp. They load a sample, release a gate, and time how far the ketchup flows in 30 seconds, too runny and it fails the grade. Ketchup is one of the only foods in America with a federally supervised speed limit. Grade A fancy ketchup must flow slower than the ramp's cutoff, and the old commercials bragging about the slowest ketchup were, whether they said so or not, bragging about a lab spec. Why does a viscosity law exist? Because thickness in ketchup, unlike the gum-faked barbecue sauces from our last file, historically signaled real tomato solids instead of water. Runny ketchup meant diluted ketchup. Watered product was the classic ketchup scam of the early 20th century. So the flow test was a fraud test, a government instrument doing exactly what this channel does, catching water dressed as food. And it's been running quietly for generations while shoppers assumed fancy meant nothing. The takeaway for your cart is small but satisfying. Fancy is a floor, not a flourish. The word quietly guarantees a minimum tomato reality. And now you're one of the only shoppers alive who knows the red packet at the drive-thru is making you a legal promise measured on a metal ramp in a government lab, which is, honestly, the most charming fact in this entire series. Quick pause, hit like and subscribe, because we decode one label nobody understands every single week, and there are decades of them left. All set? Because the next segment is what happens when the government's relationship with ketchup goes wrong. Number 5. Ketchup is a vegetable. The 1981 scandal. This is the education segment, and it's a story worth knowing whole, because it's the one time the fine print tried to happen on live television. In 1981, facing federal school lunch budget cuts of roughly $1 billion, the United States Department of Agriculture proposed regulations that would have allowed condiments like ketchup and pickle relish to count toward a vegetable serving in federally subsidized school lunches. A bookkeeping trick? Reclassify the squeeze, shrink the tray, save the budget, and on paper, a tablespoon of ketchup could stand in for the vegetable a child's plate was required to carry. Cafeterias could serve fries with ketchup and check the vegetable box twice. The backlash was immediate and historic. Newspapers ran it on front pages. Senators held up school trays. Nutritionists testified. Comedians feasted for a decade. The phrase "ketchup is a vegetable" became a national punchline and a permanent political scar cited in food policy fights to this day. Even members of the administration mocked it, one famously displaying a bottle of ketchup at a press event. The proposal was withdrawn within weeks, and it has haunted school food policy ever since, resurfacing decades later when tomato paste on pizza was credited generously in school lunch rules, prompting the equally famous headline, "Pizza is a vegetable," because 2 tablespoons of paste on a slice counted like half a cup of vegetables. The 1981 logic reborn with mozzarella on top. Why does this old story earn a segment tonight? 3 reasons. 1. It's the purest example on record of the move this channel documents weekly, redefining a word on paper instead of improving the food, the uncured trick, the enriched trick, the ham and water product trick. All of them are ketchup is a vegetable running quietly at shelf level. The label change that costs nothing and feeds no one. And in 1981, the whole country got to watch the move attempted in broad daylight, once, before it retreated to the fine print forever. 2. It tells you how ketchup is positioned in the American mind, close enough to a vegetable to almost pull it off, a quarter-sugar condiment wearing produce's reputation, and the industry has actively cultivated that closeness for decades, with the lycopene health wash, marketing campaigns celebrating ketchup's antioxidant content like a supplement. Technically true, cooked tomatoes do deliver absorbable lycopene, strategically deployed so the teaspoon of sugar rides along unmentioned, health claims as escort service for the sweetener. The exact protein bar and fruit snack playbook, running since before either existed. And 3, it's a reminder with this channel's full respect that the guardrails held, scientists and parents made noise, the proposal died. Proof that reading labels loudly, which is all this channel does, actually works. The squeeze stayed a condiment because people refused to call it a vegetable, and 40 years later, that refusal is still the law. The next segment is about what's actually read in the bottle. Number 4, tomato concentrate, and what the tomatoes are. Time to meet the first ingredient, because the label art and the supply chain have never been introduced. Ketchup is not made from the tomatoes in your imagination, the vine-ripened beauties of the label art. It's made from processing tomatoes, a different crop entirely. Dense, thick-walled, low-moisture varieties, bred for machine harvesting and paste yield, grown overwhelmingly in California's Central Valley, which grows around a third of the entire planet's processing tomatoes and nearly all of America's, harvested by machine at hundreds of tons an hour, trucked in open gondolas, and cooked within hours into industrial tomato paste at plants that run around the clock through the summer, which is then shipped, stored, and later reconstituted with water into the concentrate your label admits to. Understand what that phrase, tomato concentrate from red ripe tomatoes, is doing. It's honest, the tomatoes were real and red. And it's also describing a commodity paste supply chain where your bottle's tomato content may have been cooked into paste a year or more before you bought it. The freshness on the label art is a painting. The actual tomato is a warehouse ingredient traded in aseptic drums and totes on a global commodity market, the same distance from fresh economics as the instant masa in our tortilla file. And the same reason every mainstream bottle tastes identical, they're drawing from the same paste ocean. To be fair, and we always are, paste is not a scandal. Concentrating tomatoes is ancient, honest technology. paste is how tomato flavor survives industrially. Italy's beloved passata is the same idea done fresh, and processing tomatoes are real tomatoes optimized for exactly this job. Bred for solids and flavor concentration, often more flavorful cooked than the watery slicing tomatoes at your salad bar. The question the label never answers is proportion. How much of the bottle is tomato versus water and sweetener? And here, the fancy grade from segment 6, the thickness laws, and the ingredient order do the work. Bottles that lead with tomato concentrate and carry sweetener low versus bottles padded with water and 2 syrups. And your eye can help. Dollar store ketchups run visibly translucent and loose. Real tomato solids run opaque, deep, and heavy. Tilt 2 bottles side by side in the aisle and watch which one moves first. The Bostwick ramp lives in your wrist, and it's been a fraud test for 100 years. The next segment is the history this entire channel descends from, and for once, the giant wears the white hat. Number 3. The Heinz story, when the ketchup king fought for food safety. This is the most important segment tonight, because it's the origin story of every law this channel quotes, and ketchup is where it happened. In the late 1800s, American ketchup was legitimately dangerous. Small factories brewed it from tomato cannery scraps and trimmings. The cores and skins the canneries rejected, stretched it with fillers, dyed it red with coal tar colors to hide the brown of decay, and kept it from rotting with preservatives like sodium benzoate and worse. All unlabeled, all unregulated. Contemporary investigations found bottles that were barely tomato at all. And the government chemist Harvey Wiley, the same crusader from our Flower Files Poison Squad story, ran his famous human trials feeding measured doses of preservatives to volunteer squads of young men to document the harm. Front-page science that turned food safety into a national demand. The industry's response was to fight regulation with everything it had. Trade associations, lobbying, the standard playbook this series has documented in every era since. And here is the twist. Henry J. Heinz, the biggest name in the business, broke with the entire industry and sided with Wiley. Publicly, expensively, at war with his own trade group. Heinz's people, led by a food scientist who believed preservative-free was achievable, had developed a ketchup recipe that didn't need benzoate, using riper tomatoes with their natural pectin. More vinegar, more sugar. The sugar, in one of history's ironies, entered the recipe as the honest alternative to chemical preservatives. And clean factories he famously opened to public tours. Tens of thousands of visitors a year walking the floors as a standing dare to competitors. And the company lobbied, loudly, for the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, the law that became the FDA, betting that if honesty became mandatory for everyone, the honest recipe would win the market. Regulation as a competitive weapon, wielded by the one company clean enough to survive it. It worked. The law passed in 1906. The benzoate brands faded or reformulated. Heinz took the crown it still wears a century later. And food labels in America exist, in meaningful part, because a ketchup company decided transparency was a weapon, the single greatest vindication of this channel's entire philosophy, written by the industry itself 120 years ago. Hold that century in your hand, and now read tonight's bottle again. The company that won by removing the questionable ingredient now leads its list with 2 corn syrups. The sugar that entered the recipe in 1906 as the honest preservative has grown into the point of the product. Roughly a quarter of the bottle, and the crusading founder's name sits on a Kraft Heinz conglomerate, born of a Wall Street mega-merger, whose portfolio this series has met in file after file, and whose cost-cutting era became a business school case study of its own. Nobody at the modern company broke a law. That's not the charge. The charge is gentler and sadder. The white hat became a logo. The public factory tours became a heritage museum. And the recipe that once proved a moral point now proves a margin, optimized by a century of accountants who inherited a halo and spent it 4 grams at a time. History's lesson cuts both ways. The same company proves that industry can choose honesty when honesty sells, and that a century of winning lets it quietly stop choosing, which is why the watchdogs can never retire, not the governments, and not the ones with YouTube channels. The next segment is about how completely that winning worked. Number 2, one company's fridge door, and the 57 myth. Time for the ownership map, shortest one in the series. Because ketchup barely has a map, it has a monarch, and the monarchy is so old most Americans have never tasted a rebellion. The leading brand commands well over half of American ketchup sales, in some measures approaching 2/3, a dominance so complete that its bottle shape, its label, and its exact flavor are the definition of ketchup in most living memories. Blind taste tests barely matter in this category because familiarity is the flavor. Competitors don't fight it. They imitate it. Store brands copy the label colors down to the keystone shape, and restaurants announce they carry it as a feature. The only condiment in America whose brand name appears on other companies' menus as a selling point. A moat no advertising budget could buy. Built from a century of childhood memories 4 grams at a time. Its parent, Kraft Heinz, formed in 2015 in one of the biggest food mergers in history, also owns a portfolio of sauces, dressings, and pantry staples you've met across this series. Plus, as of the picks ahead, the biggest unsweetened rebel brand too. The monarchy collects even its critics, while the historic number 2, Hunt's, belongs to Conagra, another conglomerate with its own aisle-wide portfolio, meaning the entire visible ketchup rivalry is 2 giants, and much of the store brand shelf is packed by a handful of the same industrial co-packers drawing from the same California paste ocean. The illusion of choice pattern from our tortilla and flour files, in its purest form, a 2-party system where both parties agree completely about the teaspoon. And the 57, since you've wondered your whole life, is a myth by the founder's own design. Heinz never had 57 varieties. Henry Heinz picked the number in the 1890s riding a New York elevated train, inspired by an ad boasting 21 styles of shoes. The company already sold more than 60 products at the time. 5 was his lucky number, 7 was his wife's. 57 simply felt right. And the most famous number in American food is, by the company's own official history, a feeling. Printed on 100 billion bottles, believed as an inventory count by 5 generations, including, probably, you, until 30 seconds ago. It's harmless, it's charming, and it's the perfect emblem for this entire aisle. The most trusted details on the front of the bottle were never facts, they were fonts. Which brings us to number 1, and the 10-second habit for the fridge door. Number 1. Buying ketchup by the front of the bottle. The master key, Ketchup Edition, and after 7 segments it's compact. 5 checks, 10 seconds, permanent. Check 1. The first 3 rule. Imported straight from the barbecue file, because the family shares one weakness. Tomato concentrate first, vinegar second, and then watch the third slot like a hawk. Sweetener third is the mainstream standard. Sweetener splitting into 2 syrups, so neither ranks higher, is the confession. And any bottle where water outranks tomato has failed the Bostwick test in spirit, whatever the ramp says. Check 2. The sugar line. 4 grams a tablespoon is the mainstream teaspoon. The honest bottles in our picks run 1 gram or 0. A 4-to-1 difference on the fridge door's most used bottle. And that single number, more than any word on the front, is the entire difference between a condiment and a candy. Read it per tablespoon. Multiply by your family's real pour and decide with open eyes. Check 3. The sodium line. Ketchup quietly runs 160 to 190 milligrams a tablespoon. Salt and sugar traveling together. The Bliss formula. 3 tablespoons of ketchup carries a bag of chips worth of sodium. Counted into the sandwich math. From the deli file. The fridge door stacks with the cold case. Check 4. The vocabulary. Now fully decoded. Fancy is a real grade and a real floor. No high fructose corn syrup means the sugar wears a nicer name. Simply means the same. Organic changes the farming, not the teaspoon. Lycopene is an escort for the sweetener. 57 is a feeling. And the vegetable is still not in the bottle, no matter what 1981 tried. And check 5. The household rule. The squeeze is the serving. Portion a tablespoon onto the plate instead of handing over the bottle. Teach kids the dip instead of the flood. Run the 4-teaspoon glass demonstration from segment 8 once. And because the label's tablespoon was always a fiction, and the squeeze bottle was always engineered to pour past it, upside-down cap and all, The portion decision has to happen at the plate. It will never happen at the nozzle. 10 seconds, one number, and the red bottle joins the audited shelf. The front of the bottle is a vine that never touched this product. The back is the deposition. Read the deposition. So what should actually be in the fridge door? 3 that are actually tomato. First, Primal Kitchen unsweetened ketchup, the benchmark of the no-sugar shelf. Built by the Paleo and Whole30 movement for exactly the audience this file creates, and now owned by Kraft Heinz itself. The footnote writes its own punchline. The empire bought the rebellion, as empires in this series always do. But the label survived the acquisition intact. And the label is why it's here. It reads like a recipe. Organic tomato concentrate. Vinegar, salt, spices. No sweetener of any kind. Not sugar, not syrup, not dates. And the sugar line reads under a gram. Just the tomato's own. Judge the bottle, not the boardroom. The bottle passes every test in this file. The flavor is noticeably sharper and more tomato-forward than the mainstream bottle. This is what the fruit actually tastes like without its sugar costume. Closer to a great pasta sauce than a candy. Kids raised on the teaspoon may need a transition week. Mixing the new bottle half and half with the old one for a few dinners works. Stepping the sweetness down like a thermostat, and that adjustment period is the entire lesson of this video happening on a palate in real time. Watching a child's taste recalibrate away from the bliss point is watching the whole file in miniature. It costs 2 to 3 times the classic bottle. And per gram of actual tomato instead of syrup, the gap, as always in this series, is smaller than the shelf tag pretends. Second, an honest craft bottle with tomato first and low single-digit sweetness, the middle path for real households. If unsweetened is a bridge too far for your table, the compromise exists. Smaller brands built on tomato-first labels, real sugar in 4th or 5th position, 1 to 2 grams a tablespoon instead of 4. Spices you can name, with Sir Kensington's as the widely available example, and the honest footnote this channel always attaches. It's owned by Unilever now, the Kraft inside conglomerate pattern from our bacon and barbecue files. So buy it for the label, which remains honest, not the founding story, which remains marketing. Half the sugar is a real difference at ketchup frequencies, especially for kids. A family switching bottles removes a pound or more of sugar a year without changing a single meal. And the first 3 rule finds you a dozen regional equivalents wherever you shop. The rule outranks our brand list, always. That's the entire point of teaching it. And third, the 10-minute homemade ketchup, the format is proof pick. And after the barbecue sauce, the second easiest DIY in this series. 1 small can of honest tomato paste. The glass jar passata from our San Marzano file works too. A 1/4 cup of vinegar. Water to loosen to the thickness the Bostwick ramp would approve. A spoon of honey, or none at all. Salt, onion, and garlic powder. A pinch of allspice and clove. That's the secret. Ketchup's signature warmth is clove. Whisk and simmer 10 minutes. Done. $1 of ingredients. A jar that lasts weeks in the fridge. Sugar dialed to your conscience, or deleted entirely. And a flavor so much more alive than the bottle that the classic squeeze starts tasting like sweet red salt, which, you now know, is roughly what it is. And the clove trick alone, 1 pinch, is worth the whole segment. It's the note your tongue has been calling ketchup your entire life without knowing its name. Like the house barbecue sauce and the fresh masa before it, adjust it once and it's your family's recipe forever. Written on a card, argued over, improved each summer. The thing the 57 myth was always pretending to be. One last practical note before the close. Refrigerate after opening despite what the restaurant tables imply. The vinegar and sugar hold it safe on a diner counter through high turnover. But a home bottle lives months, and the fridge keeps the flavor honest for the months a home bottle actually lives. So there it is, the ketchup file, on the record. A teaspoon of sugar in every tablespoon behind a serving-size fiction. 2 corn syrups holding hands, so neither ranks second. A federal grade called fancy, with a flow test on a metal ramp. The year Washington tried to make the squeeze a vegetable. A warehouse paste-wearing vine-ripened art. The century-old story of the one giant who fought for the labels this channel reads. And the sad modern epilogue, written in 2 corn syrups. A monarchy so complete, Its rivals imitate its bottle, and its critics end up on its balance sheet. And a lucky number, the whole country mistook for an inventory. Against all of it, 3 ingredients read in order: 1 sugar line, 1 grade word decoded, and a 10-minute recipe with clove in it. Ketchup is the first label most Americans ever loved, the taste of childhood itself, invented as fish sauce in Asia, perfected as tomato sauce in America, weaponized as sugar sauce by the modern industry. And that's exactly why it deserved a file, because the products we never question are where the teaspoons hide longest. Share this with the parent whose kid ketchups everything. The sugar math will change their grocery list by Friday. And with anyone who thinks they know the 57 story, you're about to win a dinner argument. Then send them the Heinz history segment, because the best plot twist in this series belongs to the bottle everyone stopped looking at. Then check our files on the barbecue sauce this bottle fathered and the hot dogs it decorates, because the condiment family has a record now, and it's a family record. New investigations every single week, and the mustard beside this bottle, the mayo behind it, and the ranch above it are all still waiting their turn. The fridge door has more secrets. This has been the Ketchup File. Read the label, question the squeeze, and never let a teaspoon hide in a tablespoon.